In this week's drive, we wipe out a quarter of the field in Alabama, put the champ under pressure in the rain in Spain, chase the gravel on the bumps in Holland, and slide around with no brakes in Sweden. All this and more in this week's Drive. Jenson Button's Formula One career is on a high. He made his first pole position start at Imola and led Michael Schumacher for 9 laps. Button's eventual second place was his 3rd podium in a row this year and his best finish in 70 races.
When you have your first podium, people might say it's luck or whatever, but it's to have 3 in a row is it just shows how much we've moved forward really as a team and also our confidence. Personally, as a racing driver, you've always got confidence in your own ability, but to have so much confidence in the team and also the car is great. You know, it's the first time in my career I've had that. You know, I've been 3rd, I've been 2nd, which is already a fantastic result this season. But you know, my goals have changed big time from the start of the year. So yeah, a win is what we need, and I'm sure when I win my first race, I won't be happy with that. You know, I want to win every race, and if I don't, I'll be disappointed. Every Formula One driver and anyone in any sport wants to win for as long as they possibly can, and yeah, that's my aim.
Ferrari have added his name to their list of candidates to take over from world champ Schumacher. Technical director Ross Brawn has tipped Jenson as a potential recruit.
Yeah, it's very flattering. I've been in Formula One for this is my 5th year. Obviously gaining a lot of experience along the way, but this is the first year really I've had the equipment to perform. And when people are saying that when Michael leaves, I'm going to be one of the main men, it's a great feeling. But there's a few more years left in Michael, so I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
Jenson started his career with Williams.
My career has been a bit of a roller coaster really. In 2000 I had a great year with Williams in a very easy car to drive. In 2001 I was with Benetton and I struggled, I really did. It was inexperience and not technically I didn't really know what to do with the car, so I got a bit lost. And the same thing in 2002, and since then it's just been improving all the time. My technical understanding, which has really helped me, and it's still growing, you know. Driving, I've always been very confident in my ability, but it's the technical side that I've really had to learn over the last few years, and I think it's really showing now that I'm a much more complete driver than I have been in the past.
Fiancée Louise Griffiths is a singer-songwriter, but Jenson's been stung by media reports that blamed his lack of results on a playboy lifestyle.
I think the playboy image came from when I was at Benetton. You know, things weren't going well, and people have got to look for reasons. So they look at, I've got nice cars, I've got a boat, I've got a great lifestyle. So they say, oh, playboy, that's the reason why he's not performing. But it wasn't really the reason. But you know, I enjoy life. I wouldn't say I'm a playboy.
It's not the end of the film.
We're equal third in the championship with Williams in the Constructors' Championship. A few points behind Renault, but obviously our aim is to be in front of Renault and as close to Ferrari as we possibly can, which is the same for me. You know, I'm 3rd in the championship. The only 2 cars in front of me are Ferraris, so you know, it's just keeping that gap as small as we can, and maybe towards the end of the season we can pull back a few points.
Button was contracted to Williams for 2000, getting the drive minutes before he faced the media. By March, aged just 20, he became the youngest driver to score points in Formula One with 6th place in Brazil, his 2nd race. But he was replaced at Williams by Juan Pablo Montoya and at Benetton at the end of 2002 by Spaniard Fernando Alonso. He joined BAR to partner the now-departed Canadian former world champion Jacques Villeneuve, and now seems set to belatedly fulfill his initial potential. Over 1,000 fans attended a special mass at the Imola racetrack to mark the 10th anniversary of Ayrton Senna's death. The Catholic ceremony remembered both Senna the driver and Senna the man. A proud Brazilian, Senna used some of his money for charitable purposes, and now a foundation distributes charity in his name. Father Guidoni conducted the Mass with Senna's racing helmet beside him.
He even wanted a foundation for poor children. And the good thing about this foundation, which helps the poor children of Brazil, is that it is still working.
10 years on, it seems the Brazilian three-times world champ has as many fans today as he did when he was winning races. And fans are eager to talk about their hero.
On the 10 years after the death of Ayrton Senna here, and I want to be with my friend there and a lot of friends of Belgium, of the fan club Brussels, to be there on this event today.
Fellow Brazilian Rubens Barrichello was lucky to survive a crash in Friday's practice for the same event. But Austrian rookie Roland Ratzenberger wasn't so lucky and died in a crash on the Saturday, the day before Senna.
I come from Germany for this moment here, for the 10th anniversary of Senna.
Senna was killed during the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix when his car speared across the track at the fast Tamburello corner and hit the wall. The front suspension snapped and the wheel folded up against the cockpit surround, punching a suspension component into Senna's helmet and fatally injuring him. He was the first driver to be killed in a Formula One race for 14 years.
At the time Senna used to race, he was a real release for us all. For all the Brazilian people, he was wonderful. And when he used to fly a Brazilian flag after he had won, he used to make us go delirious.
Ayrton Senna won 41 Grand Prix and took a record 65 pole positions in his Formula One career. He was world champion 3 times, and his success boosted the image of Brazil around the world. His death prompted a series of changes in Formula One. Safety measures were instituted immediately, with cockpit surrounds being raised so that drivers were better shielded. Corners at tracks were modified and run-off areas were extended, and later drivers were compelled to wear a special head and neck support brace to prevent neck injuries. The cause of Senna's accident remains officially undecided, and an Italian court last month decided to reopen a manslaughter case. Talladega is one of the most popular stops on the NASCAR series, and a capacity crowd of fans cheered as the cars roared to a start on the high-speed, high-banked superspeedway. On lap 67, Ward Burton's car spewed white smoke, the engine destroyed by the high-speed track. He'd qualified 10th fastest at over 189 miles an hour. 17 laps later, a huge collision took out a quarter of the field. Tony Stewart tapped Kurt Busch, Busch spun, and in the smoke, several following cars piled in too. A basic racing rule says that you aim at a crash because when you get there, it'll be somewhere else. But that didn't work this time. A replay from an onboard camera showed just how violent the crash was. Remarkably, only Busch, Kenny Wallace, Derek Cope and Dave Blaney were forced out. Stewart finished 22nd on the same lap as the leaders. On lap 176, Stewart spun again but was able to save the car and keep it pointed in the right direction. But the spin caused the 10th caution period of the day, a new record for a spring race at Talladega. With Dale Earnhardt making a move to pass for the lead, coming off turn 4 on lap 184 of the 188-lap race, rookie Brian Vickers and Casey Mears collided, sending Vickers sliding and bringing out the 11th caution flag of the race, and dropped Vickers to 27th place. A replay showed that Jeff Gordon was ahead of Dale Earnhardt Jr. when the yellow flag was waved, which meant that he was the race leader. Under NASCAR's rule change from last year, the field is frozen when the yellow flag comes out. And the race would end under yellow as Gordon coasted across the finish line for the 65th win of his career, his third on Talladega's 2.66-mile oval, and the 7th in a restrictor plate race. Restrictor plates are mandatory at Talladega and Daytona, both high-banked superspeedways, to reduce the power of the vehicles, cut speeds and lessen the possibility of a really big crash. The victory moved Gordon to third in the points chase, 111 points behind Earnhardt, who finished the race in second place.
In the year 2000, a big win This is the Saab 97X.
Saab are hoping the new car will plug a gap in their range.
If you look into the market for Saab customers today, about 40% of our Saab customers here in the US have on their parking lot, their houses, an SUV. Obviously not a Saab SUV until early next year, but these figures talks its own language. So it's very important to add these to the product range.
5.3-litre V8 engines are very un-Saab-like.
It's a very exciting time to be at Saab because we are in the most prolific period of new product development in our history. In fact, the last time that Saab introduced a new product in a new segment, it was almost 2 decades ago, and that was with the convertible.
The new Saab is based on the Chev Trailblazer, and it'll be built in Ohio, the second Saab not assembled in Sweden and not sold in Europe. In December, Saab unveiled its 92X based on the four-wheel drive Subaru Impreza and built in Japan. Production of the 97X starts in January, priced between $37,000 and $45,000. After a 2-week break following a run of 3 Grand Prix in a row, it was back to work for the men of the Motocross World Championship. The first race was dominated by Cedric Malot, the day in general by Yamaha. Malot led from start to finish, and the real interest came in the battle for second place. Steve Ramon held the position for the opening 4 laps of the 20-lap race, but Joel Smets inherited it from him, while just behind, Michael Pichon crashed. The French Honda rider remounted and went on to take the checkered flag in 4th place. Smets held on to second until lap 16, losing out to Stefan Everts. But out in front, Malot came home 10 seconds ahead, with Smets third, another 7 seconds behind. The massively experienced Everts can win on any surface, as he proved in the second race. In what turned into a fascinating, intense battle, Pichon set the pace over the first 6 laps before losing out to Malot, with Everts always in touch. Everts had to battle his way back from third, eventually taking over at the front before the end of the 14th lap. As Malot pulled away, Pichon was overtaken by Smets in the tussle for third place. The contest went the full 20 laps, Everts winning in a time of 40 minutes 11.053 seconds, with Malot just over a second behind, holding off Smets by less than half a second. Everts eventually made a pass on Malot that stuck, with both picking up 47 points for their endeavours, 25 for a win and 22 for second. The gap at the top of the overall standings remains 26 points. 176 to 150 in favour of Everts. Yamaha will be hoping to continue winning at the next event in Germany, while Honda and KTM scrap over the minor placings. Stockholm hosted the first of a 9-race speedway series. The semi-finals and final came at the end of 24 heats and eliminators, without any of the favourites being eliminated early. In the first semi-final, American Greg Hancock in the red helmet lined up with Australians Jason Crump in blue, Lee Adams in white, and Englishman Lee Richardson in the yellow. Australian Jason Crump, tipped to become the 2004 champion, was almost eliminated. Crump and his countryman Adams tussled for the lead at the start, and Crump came off worst. He lost momentum on the second corner of the first lap and was brutally 4th before clawing his way up to 3rd, close behind Hancock on the final lap. As Adams took the flag, Hancock and Crump charged towards the finish line together, with Crump taking second place by the tiniest of margin on final analysis. Hancock was eliminated as only the top 2 finishers progress into the final. In the second semi, Dane Jasper Jensen lined up in red with countryman Nicky Pedersen in blue, Tomasz Golop from Poland in white, and Swedish multiple world champion Tony Rickardsson in yellow. The second semi was much more clear-cut as Jasper Jensen led until the 3rd lap, when Golop tried to take the lead and Jensen went flying into the barrier. Golop and Rickardsson qualified for the final, and Jensen was out. Rickardsson's fans were looking for a hometown victory in the final. In the final, Rickardsson kept yellow and Golop white, with Adams going into blue and Crump red. At the flag, Crump sprang forward and led the field for the first corner, but lost traction as he moved across in front of the others. Lee Adams, who's enjoying fine form already this season, moved to the inside line and found firm shale to power ahead of Crump. He held the lead to the checkered flag. Crump held on to second, while Ricardson, who had been last on the first lap, managed to pull ahead of Gollop by the finish. The sport of speedway, racing anti-clockwise around a short dirt oval with no gears and no brakes, originated in Australia. After the first round, the two Australians lead the championship from Ricardson. The next round is in Prague in the Czech Republic. After an upset first round in South Africa, the MotoGP circus is back in Europe. At the South African round, multiple world champ Valentino Rossi scraped a narrow win on his underrated Yamaha from arch-rival Max Biaggi's Honda. Rossi was confident at Jerez.
I love this race, this track. Is one of the better track for my riding style, and I have a great fun when I ride the bike here. So it's possible, also because make a good test in the pre-season. For sure will be very hard, but it's possible make another good race and fight for the victory.
Rossi became the first rider to win back-to-back races on bikes from different factories in the Premier class. He took his Yamaha right to the front just 5 minutes into Friday's practice session and was never really challenged for the remaining 55 minutes. With 10 minutes to go, the riders began streaming into the pits for fresh tyres, and the action really heated up with just 5 minutes remaining. 3 minutes from time, Rossi was still on top, followed by Biaggi, Carlos Checa, Nicky Hayden and Shinya Nakano on the suddenly competitive Kawasaki, a bike that was nowhere last year. Rossi held on to his lead in the final laps and headed the session with a record lap of the 4.4 kilometre circuit at nearly 158 kilometres an hour. Spaniard Sete Gibernau, buoyed by local support, produced a brilliant lap of his own to pass Biaggi for second place on provisional pole, with moments left in the session. He qualified second to Rossi in South Africa too, but finished the race well back in third. Carlos Checa was one of the riders who struggled all of last year to get a decent result from the Yamaha, but Rossi's performance has inspired him and he claimed a provisional third place on the grid. Max Biaggi was 250cc champion 4 times, but has failed to win the Premier class. With rival Rossi coming to terms with his new bike, Max has his best chance of snaring the title this year, and he claimed provisional 4th place. Biaggi's teammate, Makoto Tamada, certainly has the pace and finished the first practice session just 1/10 of a second slower than Max. In the 250cc class, Aprilia rider Sebastian Porto survived a frightening crash, returned to the pits, took out his spare bike and incredibly posted the fastest opening qualifying time. He was the only rider to qualify under 1 minute 44 seconds on Friday. Television slow-mo replays showed the Argentinian falling directly onto his head, but Porto got away with nothing more than a few scratches and bruises. In the 125cc class, Italian Marco Simoncelli claimed provisional pole ahead of local rider Alvaro Bautista and Australian Casey Stoner on a KTM. However, final qualifying the next day saw changing weather conditions. The start of Saturday's session was run in wet weather, forcing riders to go out on rain tyres for about 20 minutes. When the sun appeared, most riders pulled into the pits for slicks. But the rain started to fall again about 10 minutes later, and the riders changed back to full wets, ending any chance of improved lap times over Friday's session, keeping Rossi's pole position intact. Riders spent much of the session watching the weather. Brief intermittent showers punctuated by bright sunshine throughout the day left the circuit in varying degrees of dampness in the space of a single session, presenting riders with the near impossible task of gathering setup information in constantly changing conditions. Sete Gibernau retained his front row start. Another Spaniard, Carlos Checa, would start from the final place on the new 3 abreast grid, beside compatriot Gibernau on the Honda after some consistently fast laps in the dry conditions during the first and ultimately definitive qualifying session. Max Biaggi dominated much of the damp session but couldn't improve his 4th place. He has Japanese company on the second row, with Honda teammate Tamada alongside and Shinya Nakano lining up in sixth, equaling a best-ever MotoGP grid position for Kawasaki. Kenny Roberts, the 2000 champion, was best on the damp track and edged out Troy Bayliss on his Ducati, closer to his qualifying time than any other rider as he set the second fastest time of the day, and Roberts would start 10th. Sebastian Porto held on to the third pole position of his career after the wet final session prevented any big changes to the 250 grid. Wet specialist Anthony West was the only big mover, shifting up to the fifth row. It was the same in the 125 class, where 17-year-old Italian Marco Simoncelli's ride in the first session was good enough for a career-first pole position from Spain's Alvaro Bautista on an Aprilia and KTM rider Australian Casey Stoner. Conditions got worse on race day and the MotoGP race started in the rain. Rossi was swamped off the line, his pole position not counting for much by the first corner. He'd hoped that his underpowered Yamaha would be on more equal terms with the Hondas in the wet conditions, but Rossi was never really in the hunt. Gibernau grabbed an early lead as Biaggi and Checa battled on the slick track. Troy Bayliss completed a wretched weekend by crashing his Ducati. Rossi was being harried by Checa and Brazilian Alex Barros, who replaced Rossi in the Works Honda team. Checa disposed of Rossi and challenged for the lead, but later dropped back, having ripped up his soft, wet-weather tyres, and finally crossed the line in sixth place. Marco Melandri was on his way to a first MotoGP podium until 8 laps from the end. Biaggi duelled with Gibernau before dropping off the pace in the last few laps for a safe second. In claiming the win, Sete delighted 125,000 local fans who'd packed the circuit grandstands despite constant rainfall since the early hours of the morning. Barros completed an all-Honda podium as Rossi's Yamaha came fourth, the first time he's failed to make the podium since August 2002.
I think we both did a very, very good race, and what I have to say is that still we have a lot of work to do. This does not mean that we are ready to win every race, but with problems to start with 2 podiums in the championship is very good, and now I have to keep my head down and thank my team for their work, and this was a great result for me.
Victory in the second round of the season also moves Gibernau to the head of the championship standings with a 1-point advantage over Biaggi and 3 over Rossi. In the 250s, class rookie and 125 champion Dani Pedrosa took an early lead. Reigning world champion Manuel Poggiali was an early crasher, followed by Pedrosa on lap 4, while he was trying to shake off his rivals, and Pedrosa's teammate Hiroshi Ioma soon after. Spaniard Fonzi Nieto grabbed third place from Australian Anthony West in a daring last-lap challenge. Roberto Rolfo mastered the conditions, and an impressive display of consistency on a soaked track gave him his third career victory. Frenchman Randy Depunier was second, 8.7 seconds behind, and Fonzi Nieto came third. Pedrosa led the championship going into this round, but lost important points when he crashed. Second place for Depunier means that he takes the championship lead from Pedrosa, who drops to third behind Rolfo. Marco Simoncelli took his maiden 125 victory after runaway leader Casey Stoner hit a puddle and crashed his KTM with just 3 laps remaining. Stoner remounted to finish fifth. Simoncelli's veteran teammate Steve Yenkner was second, with Spaniard Hector Barbera third. Andrea Dovizioso crossed the line in fourth to maintain his championship lead, which now stands at 10 points over Yenkner and Roberto Locatelli. The next race is at Le Mans in France. So, whether you're the new golden boy, have some explaining to do, or just jumping up at the front, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.